Greetings, dear friends. Welcome to this live stream for Empty Cloud Monastery. I'd like to begin, as usual, by paying homage to our teacher, the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Uppaniyati loko atu attano loko anabisaro asako loko sabang pahaya gamaniyang uno loko atito tamhada soti. So today, dear friends, I'm going to speak about turning the wheel of Dhamma. And greetings those who've joined already. Warm welcome to you. This time of year, as many of you will know, is the vassa. For the monastics, we make a determination to stay in one place for 3 months. And the vassa begins with the full moon of July and ends with the full moon of October. And the beginning of the vassa, we celebrate Asalaha Puja in the Theravadan tradition. And we focus on this time of the Buddha's first teaching, Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the turning of the wheel of Dhamma. This teaching is the first recorded sermon of the Buddha that we have. And the story goes that the Buddha, when he became the Buddha, he looked around to see who could he possibly teach this profound Dharma to. And he thought of his teachers and his companions in the spiritual life. And he made his way to Sarnath, near Varanasi, where his 5 companions in the ascetic practices that he'd been following for years with them, where they were staying. He'd separated out from them, as you know, many of you, because he had a change of heart and recognized that the ascetic practices were not necessarily helpful for liberation. And so anyway, he went back after he became the Buddha to teach these companions, these 5. And this is the first recorded teaching he gave. Probably he was, teaching in various different ways over a period of time. Actually, we get this impression from the suttas, reading between the lines, that the Buddha was instructing and encouraging his companions for quite some time. And they gradually came to understand what he was conveying. And this sermon then is perhaps a compilation of the essential teachings of the Buddha from this time. And what's really striking about it is that it's so concise, and it is the core teaching from which all other teachings flow. So if you want to read Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, those of you who haven't read it or would like to review it, it's Samyutta Nikaya, number 56. And 1156, Samyutta Nikaya 1156. I put in the chat, I put a number of recommended suttas. There's also a beautiful sutta in Majjhima Nikaya 141, where these teachings from the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the first teaching of the Buddha, where they're really laid out for us and explained in more detail. So I really recommend also, if you do read the first teaching of the Buddha, then also look at Majjhima 141 to flesh out the teaching. But it's very, in a way, straightforward and simple as a framework. What's within the framework of this teaching of the Four Noble Truths is all of the Dhamma, really. It's the entire path. It's like our whole life of practice is there. But this formulation is said to be, special to Buddhas, to be able to explain our situation so concisely, so clearly for us. And so the Four Noble Truths are what I'm going to speak about today. And of course, this topic is vast, So really, let's just see what I can express today. We're all, aren't we? All of us who practice, we're contemplating and putting into practice these Four Noble Truths like throughout our lives. And so this is really just an encouragement and an exploration together to focus, our attention, our energy on these great teachings of the Buddha, which Sariputta in another teaching, Maha Hathipadopama Sutta, which is there in the reading, suggested reading, Majjhima 28, he said, it's like the footprint of the elephant, the biggest footprint in the forest, how all the footprints of all the other animals will fit into this giant footprint of the elephant. In the same way, all the teachings of the Buddha fit into this teaching of the Four Noble Truths. And so we want, we come back to it again and again, don't we? We're constantly, in a way, referring to the Four Noble Truths and reminding ourselves and investigating and deepening, our understanding and practice of these great truths. So let's look at them one by one. First noble truth, truth of suffering. The Buddha said this is the first noble truth to open our hearts to, that there is suffering. And what does it mean? Suffering, pain, unsatisfactoriness, imperfection, not quite right. There is an impossibility of getting it quite right, getting quite the right conditions for long enough, getting a sustained sense of well-being in samsara, in this world of change. And personally, I struggled a bit when I first started practicing to really understand the First Noble Truth of suffering. And this is our job as practitioners, is to understand the meaning of this statement. There is suffering. Because it may be really clear, to many of you, of course, this human condition is unsatisfactory. It's difficult. It's painful in many ways, on many levels. But some of us may feel that, well, actually, life is quite good, and there are many good moments. And there's a lot to look forward to. And I'm so grateful and appreciative of this existence. And that is actually quite skillful. But it's also so necessary, so helpful to open the door to the understanding of the essential imperfection in this situation and to focus on that. So, if everything's going well and there's no experience of suffering, there's a lot of pleasure, a lot of happiness, a lot of well-being. It really behooves us, we do well to remember, bring up the Buddha's fundamental teaching that all things are impermanent. So if we don't have much of a grasp of the concept of dukkha, consider impermanence, bring that in, because this is the key, in a way, to the door, to opening the door to this First Noble Truth. We can't find a satisfactory resting place here because things are constantly changing. So, like the verse I just chanted at the beginning of this session, it's from Ratapala Sutta, Majjhima 82. It's a beautiful summary of our situation that this monk Ratapala gave to he went back when he became an arahant. Ratapala went back to his hometown and he met with his family, and he was trying to, convey his understanding to them, not very successfully, I'm afraid. But he also met, while he was meditating in a park, the leader of that community, the king or the chief of the area, and he spoke with him on Dhamma, and this leader was quite receptive to what Ratapala had to say. And so Ratapala gave him these fundamental expressions, teachings about reality, about Dhamma. And he said, Upaniyati loko aduo. Upaniyati, everything's flowing, everything's moving forward to the next thing. This is the way the world is. Aduo, it's unstable. It's nothing lasts. And this we can really look around us, even if we're feeling like there's nothing really wrong here. We can look around us and we can just take in, investigate, perceive how everything's changing, everything's flowing, nothing stays the same. So whatever good fortune, happiness, well-being we have, it doesn't last. It doesn't last. Old age, sickness, and death. And then Ratapala goes on to say to this king, Atano loko anabisaro. Atano, we are not protected here. There's no safety here. Anabisaro, there's no divine protector. There's no supreme leader here. We're certainly not in control of our own situation or destiny, and nor is anyone else, any other being. So it's interesting how in Buddhism we don't have so much the sense of a divine protecting deity looking after us. It's more a sense, there are many deities, but they're observing us. They're observing, they're compassionately, kindly present in some way, but they're not actually in control of our destiny. They're not even in control of their own destiny. So how could they be in control of ours? They may be very benevolent, benign, well-wishing, but there is nothing that can get between us and karma. Past causes and conditions have led us to this place, this situation, and we will roll on, subject to karma, subject to cause and effect. Following the laws of Dhamma, the laws of nature, we will continue to move forward without any protection, without any safety whatsoever, until we start to find our refuge, find our ground in our spiritual practice, in the path of practice. Ratapala goes on to say, Asako loko, this world is possessionless. We can't own anything here. We might think we own things, but what happens to them and what happens to us? He says, Sabang pahaya gamaniyang. All things are to be left behind. Sabang pahaya, we have to abandon, we have to leave everything behind. Gamaniyang, as we move forward. So all is lost. All that's not given away will be taken from us. We can't carry it with us. So there we are. This is the situation we're in. And Ratapala finishes by saying this. He says, Uno loco atito tanha dasati. Uno, lacking, wanting. This world is lacking. Atito, it is always discontented. It's insatiable. Why? Tanha daso. It's a slave of craving. So this is the situation we're in. And it's really good to reflect in this way, because to find our understanding of dukkha, how can we understand this first noble truth of the Buddha, that there is dukkha? We can understand that there's this insatiable quest that we're all on until we wake up to it, which is this quest to make it right, to make it work, to make happiness last, to make good conditions last, to feel safe, to feel comfortable here. And we're trying to do this all the time until we wake up to this dukkha, this impossibility of it coming right for us. So we may have moments, of, great conditions and happiness and well-being in samsara, but it inevitably, something will come in to change that. It will come to an end. And so we know this, and we do well to keep remembering this, and to, in this way, direct our attention towards the problem here. So the Buddha's saying, like a physician, he's saying there's a disease. It's dukkha. It's the first noble truth. There is suffering. So this is the wound that we're carrying. This is the essential sense of it not being okay. If we ever feel, some of us, tend to feel that things are pretty good, actually. Many of us tend to feel things are really not okay for all sorts of reasons. We could write lists and lists. When we have that feeling, things are not okay, there's so much wrong here, this is something we can then utilize to direct our attention to path, because this is a fundamental truth. We can feel a kind of almost like a relief to recognize that, yes, of course, things are not okay. How could I expect things to be okay? How could I expect things to be other than difficult, painful, disturbing, upsetting? It's almost a relief to recognize, well, yeah, this is a truth. It's a noble truth that we can understand. And from this place, and we can move forward and practice for liberation. So we know what the disease is. We know there is disease. If we don't know it, we want to consider these teachings. Consider Ratapala's teachings to the king, to the leader in his area, that everything in this world is unstable. It's swept away. There's no possessions we can hold to. There's no safety here. There's no guardian. There's no protector. Everything's falling away from us all the time. And come to this then second noble truth of the cause of suffering here. And it's really interesting to, and important to distinguish between the dukkha that's inevitable and samsaric, and the dukkha that is optional, that's we can emerge from. The dukkha that's inevitable is birth, aging, sickness, and death, because we have these bodies, we have these forms, so we have this trajectory. This is inevitable, but we can certainly make peace with it. We can choose whether to suffer around it or not. And this is the path of practice, to recognize nature, the course of nature, constant change, everything ending. That is natural. We can be fine with that if we wake up and appreciate that the cause of our suffering here is the second noble truth, is craving, is desire. This is optional. How wonderful. How wonderful. We can choose to let go of desire. What is to be done with this second noble truth, this understanding that there's an insatiable energy here of wanting to make it right, wanting to get away from things. There's this fundamental ignorance, not seeing clearly, that is the cause of our suffering. And this fundamental ignorance sort of multiplies and proliferates into desire and aversion, wanting and not wanting, in a like multiplicity of forms. But the fundamental root of all of this is ignorance, is not recognizing the first noble truth of suffering, the second noble truth of cause. So can we relate to our lives, friends, as seekers, opening our hearts and minds to understanding the unsatisfactoriness we experience and rooting out, investigating, elucidating, unearthing the cause. Whenever I want something, whenever I want to get away from something, there's the suffering that can be let go of. How do I let go of that suffering? I let go of the wanting and not wanting. I let go of that argument with reality. I let go of that fight, It's an enormous effort to be constantly railing against what is. Can I just put aside that argument, that fight, and open to what is present and not make a problem about it? Can I be contented? Can I rest at ease? And this is, of course, possible when we focus our attention on the second noble truth and see the cause of suffering. Is there wanting or is there not wanting here? And as soon as we notice that movement for or against, this we can pay attention to, can't we? And to pay attention is to be in the body, to be paying attention to the body, to be aware of the thinking processes, to be aware of the emotions, to pay attention here and to root out the causes of this, any kind of agitation, restlessness, unease, unhappiness, dissatisfaction. So we can do this, and then we come to the third noble truth, which is the cessation of suffering. And it's really wonderful to notice this. This is a realization. It's a realization that we can have again and again whenever we are aware of desire or aversion, wanting to mess with reality, and we don't follow those impulses, but we observe what's going on here. We sit with it. We stay with it. We don't grab the thing that we want. We don't push away the thing that we don't want. We just observe the process of desiring, of hating, and see how this too, of course, changes. See how these energies have a momentum and they last for a while and then they fade. And we can sit through desire, we can sit through aversion, and we can watch them arise and pass. And this, beautiful experience of freedom can be realized again and again. The letting go of desire. Third noble truth, There is an end to suffering, and it is the letting go of desire, abandoning it, putting it aside. And we can't make this happen, of course. It's like Ajahn Chah said famously, 90 something percent of the path is knowing that we should let go, but not being able to. It's okay to notice how much we are battered around by desire and aversion. How much of our lives, friends, are a manifestation of wanting and not wanting, because we're doing it all the time. Monastic life can be helpful because we have less opportunity to follow our desires. So then we get to sit with them. It's like we've got our back against the wall. We can't get what we want. We can't choose what we eat, where we live, what clothes we have or wear. There's very limited choices. And that's a great blessing and a support for path, as is for all of us renunciation, to be mindful of what it is we really love in this world. What are we attached to? What do we hit on again and again for our pleasure, for our satisfaction? Look at sense desire. Look at the things we enjoy and consider letting them go, giving them up, and see what happens. Because this immediately then gives us an opportunity, doesn't it, to be present with desire. So if I give up my morning coffee that I depend upon, it's essential to start my day, give it up, see what happens. We may be sleepy and grumpy, but also we can sit with that and feel the waves of longing. It's amazing how much desire we can unearth when we give up our habits. And please, consider this and use this, because it's humbling, it's awakening for us to give up the things we love and just see how many layers of wanting will reveal themselves as we make our determination to renounce. How beneficial. Many people, monastics at the time, at the beginning of vassa that we're just in at this point, the vassa just started a few days ago. Many people, many monastics will make vows and determinations to renounce, essentially, to give up something comfortable, something pleasant, to let go of things we like and enjoy, because the recognition is that those are snares for us, those are traps. It's like the deer hunter has laid the trap and we've got caught in it every time we hit on what we love in samsara, because we're just allowing ourselves to fool ourselves into thinking that everything's okay when it's not, when whatever we love and desire, inevitably we will lose at some point. Let's not wait till death, friends, to give up all the things that we love, because if we wait until death, it's a great trauma to have to let go of so much. If we're wise, we practice with renunciation and just keep giving things up and see what happens. Because yes, it's painful, it's difficult. We have to sit then and observe waves of desire and longing and sense of something's missing, sense of emptiness, sense of voracious appetite, longing and yearning. But as many of you will know, when we're willing to face up to the second noble truth of desire, then we get to open our hearts to freedom. Only through letting go of desire can we experience liberation. experience the realization of cessation of desire, cessation of suffering. So we get the chance to breathe a bit freer. We give up something we love. I give up my morning coffee and I'm grumpy and sleepy and fed up. And I sit and all I want is my morning coffee. And all I can visualize, it just keeps coming, the vision of the morning coffee, and I can taste it. You know, that's all that's happening for a while. But then after a while, if I'm willing to sit with that desire, what happens then is a moment comes and something else has happened. I've forgotten about it. I'm at one with the breath. I'm really in the body, feeling the body, or I may be simply thinking of something else. Whatever, what's noticeable if we are awake to cessation is that that desire has gone. At some point it will disappear, friends, as many of you know. And that moment of cessation is a very beautiful and important moment to recognize. Cessation has been realized. The giving up of desire is like an active process. It takes effort. It's a challenge. It's a workout. To realize cessation, it's natural. It's a happening. It's not an active thing. It's more like a passive waking experience. So we can easily not notice it. It's like when you're really sick and you get some medicine and you get cured. How wonderful. And very quickly, we can forget all about having been sick, as if it never happened. We just put it aside. Like women giving birth, how painful, how excruciating, and for such a long period. Ow. And then once the baby arrives and they're so immersed in looking after this beautiful new being that's been born, their child, how quickly one can forget all the pain and suffering that has happened in order for that child to appear. So, you know, in the same way, we can really not notice these moments of freedom, these moments where even very strong desires have simply disappeared as if they never existed. And, you know, if I give up my morning coffee in this example and I sit for a few days and there may be waves of desire, at some point, you know, you get to the point where it no longer is an issue. Take it or leave it. Would you like a coffee this morning? Not really. Noticing that freedom, noticing that something has been let go of, and that something is desire. So this third noble truth is something to really reflect upon and to appreciate, because it gives us encouragement. It gives us a sense of progress on the path. And then, of course, the fourth noble truth, the medicine, the cure, or rather the prescription. The Buddha so brilliantly, you know, when he first started teaching, focused on these four noble truths as the entire path of practice. In order to practice, we need to understand suffering, its cause, and the way out of suffering. And then we have the way, the prescription, the guidance, the map, the roadmap to Nibbana, the Eightfold Path. So the fourth noble truth is just this, isn't it? As many of you know very well, and many of us will be, you know, applying the Eightfold Path factors to our lives. This image of the wheel that the Buddha gave in his first teaching, the turning of the wheel of Dhamma, this Dhamma chakra, this wheel. In Buddhism, we see it everywhere, don't we? On the flag of India, there it is, the eight-spoked wheel, the wheel of Dhamma. Dhamma meaning truth, Dhamma meaning the teachings of the Buddha. So this wheel with its 8 spokes is like a symbolic representation for us of the Eightfold Path, isn't it? And there we have it. This wheel that rolls forward. We want to be moving forward in the direction of Dhamma, in the direction of Nibbana, the direction of freedom, the direction of letting go. And of course, this momentum, this rolling of the wheel of Dhamma that was started by the Buddha back in Sarnath 2,500 plus years ago. It's still rolling on every time somebody takes up the teachings and starts to put them into practice. And this wheel of Dhamma that's rolling on, the Buddha Sasana, is rolling in precisely, exactly the opposite direction, isn't it? The opposite direction of the wheel of samsara. The wheel of samsara that has been turning throughout time and space, beginningless and endless. This is the wheel of suffering, the treadmill, subject to ignorance. Beings are born repeatedly, taking birth and running in samsara, propelled by greed, by hatred, and by confusion. These fundamental roots, desire, aversion, and ignorance. And this is the wheel of samsara that's endlessly rolling forward. When we start to engage with path, when we wake up to the spiritual teachings of the Buddha, we turn ourselves around, friends, and we face the opposite direction, and we start to move in line with the wheel of Dhamma. So what are we doing? We're going exactly against the worldly flow, against the current, against the worldly aims and values. And it's good to recognize this and to make much of this. Notice this. Everything in us, until we start practicing for liberation, is geared towards getting what we want, getting away from what we don't want, getting our wishes met, following, our desires in whatever way we do that. And there's no end to the ways in which human beings, all beings, will follow their desires. And this is what we're doing. And it's like being on autopilot. It's a blind, ignorant way of being. But this is what we do until we wake up to the Four Noble Truths and we start to go in the opposite direction. Instead of following my desires, I'm going to let them go. When I want something, I'm going to investigate. What am I going to investigate? The feeling, the impulse, the momentum of desire. And friends, we may do this or we may do that in the world. It's not as if we stop doing anything altogether, but we are within ourselves letting go of desire, letting go of aversion. And we see then how the Eightfold Path can manifest here. How can right speech, right action, and right work, right livelihood manifest here? How can mind development manifest here? Through right effort, right mindfulness, right stillness or concentration or focus. How can we develop in wisdom? Keep contemplating these Four Noble Truths, that is right view, and hone and develop and focus our intentionality, right intention, harmlessness, and renunciation. This is right intention. So we have many, many opportunities to manifest skillfully in the world when we're following the Eightfold Path. And we are going in directly the opposite way from the wheel of suffering, the wheel of samsara. We're no longer victims of our desire and aversion. We're no longer on autopilot. Now we're waking up to the way things are. And so we can direct our energies, manifest in this world in this completely other way, you know. How wonderful to investigate that, to see how that plays out, to see how we can use the situation here. There are these bodies, there are these minds and hearts. There is work to be done, you know. No longer are we motivated by selfish aims and values. We're no longer trying to get satisfaction here. We're no longer trying to be comfortable, trying to, you know, meet all our needs and desires. Rather, we're looking in a completely different way at this life and seeing how can we develop on this path of practice? How can we grow in generosity, in virtue? Yeah. How can we grow our understanding of the Four Noble Truths? How can we practice for liberation in every moment? And of course, the beautiful thing about this Dhamma is that our practicing for liberation is not just benefiting this one here. We're not just becoming more attuned to real happiness and well-being here, but also we get to benefit the whole. Everyone around us benefits when this wheel is moving in the direction of liberation, nibbana, rather than in the direction, the opposite direction of more suffering, more samsara. So, you know, there's so much to consider and contemplate when we look at this framework of the Four Noble Truths. And notice then also all other Dharma teachings come into this framework, how everything can come back to this simple, profound model of the Four Noble Truths. And so I invite you to consider further and to celebrate with me, you know, the great teaching of the Buddha, Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, first teaching that we have, and also to consider the beautiful summary of the essential teaching of this first sermon that you can find in Majjhima 141. Recommend that. Satya Vibhanga Sutta, the exposition of the truth. So thank you, friends, for your kind attention. And I think I'll stop talking here and see if we have any questions or comments from you all. Thank you for your presence. Those who are here, Bhumika, Julie, hi, Harish, Karuna, Kit, Madeline, and Brian. Thank you so much. It's good to see you all in the chat there. And I'm not seeing any questions, so I think we can close here. Wish you all a very good week. And let's finish with 3 sadhus for our teacher, the Buddha. Sadhu, 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 anumodamani.